At the annual family brunch, my sister tapped her glass. To our sweet sponsor, always paying, never invited. They chuckled. I raised my coffee and said, to the ones who just got a notification their mortgage assistance disappeared. My sister's phone buzzed first, then my dad's, and then the room went silent. It was supposed to be just another family brunch, but for me, it was the last time I'd sit through one of these things, pretending their jokes didn't cut. I'd spent years swallowing it, letting them take digs about how I kept to myself, letting them mock me while cashing the checks I sent like it was some silent tax I owed for being the quiet one. But this time I wasn't tired. I was done. This wasn't anger. I'd passed that stage months ago. What I felt now was colder, focused, calculated. This was about correction, about finally returning the favor. The brunch was at Melissa's place again. Her 2-story suburban fantasy that she loved bragging about but couldn't afford without me. She always acted like hosting made her the queen of the family, like buying new patio furniture on clearance and renting table settings somehow made her a matriarch. But we both knew who made that house stand. They all showed up dressed for social media. Sunglasses, white clothes, and carefully casual smiles. My dad in one of his golf polos, even though he hadn't played in years. My cousin Danny acting like he invented crypto, even though he borrowed rent money from me 3 months back. No one asked how I was doing. They never did. I sat there watching them nibble overpriced cheese I paid for, pouring drinks from bottles I'd ordered, acting like I was just lucky to be included, like they didn't spend every other month asking me for help. Melissa always phrased it like a joke. Just a little loan from our family banker. Right, Emily? They laughed when she said it. They always laughed, like helping them wasn't draining, like I didn't work 60-hour weeks to cover their lifestyle gaps while they played pretend stability. So when Melissa tapped her glass, I already knew it was coming. She stood up smirking like she was on stage at some dumb charity gala. To our sweet sponsor, always paying, never invited. The laughter was louder this time, maybe because they thought I'd never snap, maybe because they thought I couldn't. Dad leaned back and clinked his mimosa glass against Danny's. My aunt wiped tears from her eyes. I raised my coffee. To the ones who just got a notification, their mortgage assistance disappeared. It hit instantly. Melissa's phone buzzed once. She glanced down. Her smile cracked just slightly. Then a second buzz. Her face changed. Then Dad's phone lit up. He reached for it slower, read something, blinked, looked around the table like someone had moved the floor beneath him. The room fell into an eerie quiet. I didn't look at any of them directly. I just kept going. There's more coming. Then I took a bite of the croissant on my plate like nothing had happened. I'd canceled the auto payments the night before, the ones I'd been quietly making for Melissa's mortgage and Dad's car lease. They never knew the accounts were in my name. They just assumed help would always be there. I made sure the notifications would hit during brunch. They liked mocking the sponsor. Now the sponsor was closing the account. Melissa vanished inside her house the moment her phone buzzed that second time. She tried to play it off, some fake smile, a mumbled excuse about checking the oven or whatever. No one believed her. I watched her through the kitchen window from where I was sitting, saw her pacing near the counter, phone pressed to her face, probably refreshing the app again and again, like the numbers would fix themselves. She was probably just realizing the payments weren't automatic from her account. They never had been. For the last 13 months, I'd been covering the shortfall on her mortgage, quietly topping off whatever she didn't have every first of the month like clockwork. She told herself she was managing, but that management relied entirely on me, and now it was gone. When she came back out, her voice was tighter, not loud, not dramatic, just controlled, like someone trying not to panic. She said she didn't know what was going on, that something weird was happening with her lender, and asked me, loud enough for everyone to hear, if I'd heard anything. I didn't look at her. You mean besides the text that said, "Your mortgage help has been deactivated"? The table was dead silent. She tried to keep it together, tried to steer it back to her version of reality, said that I should have given her a heads up if something changed, that I should have talked to her before making a decision that could affect her house. I asked when the last time she talked to me was when she wasn't asking for money. That landed. Melissa always had a way of flipping the script, making herself the victim, no matter how things went. Last Christmas, she cornered me in the hallway and cried about being a single mom with too much pride to ask for help while sipping wine I bought and handing her kid an iPad I paid for. She knew how to get what she needed, but not anymore. She went quiet after that, stayed seated, texting someone, probably her lender, maybe her ex-husband. I don't know. But the air around her had shifted. She wasn't the center of attention anymore. She wasn't leading the brunch. That's when my dad started catching on. He'd been scrolling through his phone for a while, trying to act like none of this was bothering him. But then he stiffened, his brow furrowed. He cleared his throat like he was about to speak in front of a courtroom, not a brunch table. He asked if I'd done something with his lease, said he just got a message that the payment didn't go through, that the dealership would be in touch. I didn't look up, just said, I stopped paying it. You said you wanted to be more independent. He blinked, then laughed nervously like I'd made a joke. I didn't. He said we had an agreement, that he'd pay me back, that I told him I'd cover it until his real estate project picked up. That was over a year ago. I hadn't seen a dime. He made more promises than he made phone calls. I reminded him of something he once said to me when I was 16 and asked for help with a school laptop. He told me, word for word, you want something, you figure out how to get it. That's how life works. He didn't remember saying it, but I did. Melissa finally looked up from her phone. She could feel it too. The change in temperature, the way the rest of the table had gone still, eyes darting between the three of us like they'd accidentally sat down in the middle of a hostage negotiation. I sat back in my chair, took another sip of coffee, didn't even look at them when I said, this is just the beginning. You'll start understanding what it feels like to be expected to give everything and get nothing. No one laughed now. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the quiet one. I felt like the only one speaking. After that moment, the air never went back to normal. They tried, of course. My aunt reached for the fruit tray and started rambling about something she saw on a cooking show. Danny cracked a joke about needing another drink. Uncle Alex canned brunch too. A few people gave nervous chuckles, but it didn't land. No one was relaxed anymore. They weren't used to feeling uncertain around me. I was always the buffer, the one who stayed quiet, wrote checks, and disappeared before dessert, the one who made things easier without asking for anything back, the one they mocked because they assumed quiet meant weak. Now they didn't know where they stood. They didn't know what I controlled. That was the part that started eating at them. They were all thinking the same thing. What else has Emily been paying for? Melissa was done pretending. She kept swiping on her phone like she was trying to bring her balance back to life. The smirk she walked in with was gone, replaced by something much closer to panic. She stood up again and went inside without a word, probably to call her lender. I imagined that conversation, how she tried to fake calm, ask about a mistake, and then go cold when they confirmed what she was now learning. That for over a year, I'd been the one floating her mortgage, and now I wasn't. Dad was stiff. He had his arms folded across his chest and hadn't looked up from his phone since I mentioned the lease. He thought he'd struck a deal last year, asked for a short-term boost. Just a few months until a rental property he invested in started producing. That was 15 months ago. I kept the lease going out of habit. Not because I respected him, just because I didn't feel like watching him spiral. Now I did. He muttered something under his breath, then got up and walked down the lawn, phone to his ear, pretending to talk about golf plans. He hated when he wasn't in control. Hated it more when people saw it. Meanwhile, Danny was fidgeting next to the wine cooler. He hadn't been directly hit yet, but he could feel it coming. He kept looking at me like I might say his name next, like I might announce something in front of everyone. He tried to soften me, said quietly that he appreciated me, that not everyone did, but he always noticed, that we should talk sometime, just me and him. No family. I nodded, but didn't say anything back. He knew what that meant. And what none of them fully understood yet was that they were only seeing the first wave. I'd spent the last month preparing this, quietly untying myself from every financial favor. I closed accounts, canceled auto payments, revoked permissions. They hadn't noticed because they never paid attention. They were so used to money showing up, they forgot to ask where it came from. I didn't have to raise my voice. I didn't need some dramatic speech. All I needed was a cup of coffee and a slow, deliberate silence. Because in silence, they couldn't predict me, couldn't guilt me, couldn't control me. And that's what scared them most. Melissa came back out with her phone in her hand and her jaw tight. She didn't speak, just sat down hard in her chair and stared at her empty plate. Whatever she'd been told on the phone had cut through whatever story she was still telling herself. Dad returned a few minutes later, muttering something about calling the dealership on Monday. His voice was lower now. He didn't look at me. Danny didn't touch his food. And me? I just sat back in my chair and watched the brunch I used to pay for unravel piece by piece. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about control. And for the first time, they realized they never had any. Melissa didn't talk to anyone for the next 30 minutes. She just sat there scrolling through her phone with the intensity of someone looking for a reset button. Her kid came up and asked if he could go in the pool, and she snapped at him, loud enough that everyone heard it. That was new. Melissa never broke character in public, not even with family. Dad still had his arms folded like he was bracing for something, probably calculating whether he could convince one of his golf buddies to co-sign on a new lease. His pride was massive, but not as deep as his debts. Danny kept trying to act normal, kept nudging conversations toward anything unrelated, sports, crypto, music, but no one was biting. Every few seconds, his eyes shifted to me. He hadn't gotten a message yet, but the silence around him was getting louder. That's when the unexpected started to land. My Aunt Carol, the one who always bragged about her clean credit and well-managed life, let out a weird little gasp. Her phone screen was still lit. She stared at it for a long time before saying quietly that her card just declined, the one she always used for groceries. Everyone looked at her. She looked at me. I never told them this, but months ago, she had asked for a one-time emergency top-up on her bank card when her unemployment ran out early. She said it was just for a month or two. I didn't even ask for details. I just connected a recurring payment to a sub-account she gave me and let it run. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep her from spiraling. I had just canceled it the night before. You'd think a few hundred wouldn't cause panic, but it's not the amount. It's the message. I could feel the shift. No one said it out loud, but they were all thinking it. How deep does this go? Then it happened. Another twist I didn't plan for. Melissa's husband, Rob, came outside. He wasn't supposed to be here. They'd been taking a break for months. He didn't speak to anyone at first, just walked up to her and whispered something. She looked like she was about to explode. Then she turned to me. "Did you tell him?" I blinked. "Tell him what?" "That the house might be in default, that we might lose it, that I've been taking your help. Did you tell him?" I shook my head. Didn't need to. She turned back to Rob and they walked inside together. You could practically see the argument brewing in the air behind them. I hadn't told him anything, but I knew he was subscribed to the same credit monitoring service I was, and if the alerts were still on the account, tied to their shared mortgage, he would have gotten them the second the payment stopped. They always thought the danger was me talking, but the truth was I didn't have to say a word. I'd set everything up so that once I stepped back, the truth would start telling itself. More phones started buzzing around the table. My cousin Jenny, who had asked for help with a temporary rent hike in her apartment downtown, suddenly looked like she saw a ghost. She was halfway through telling someone about a bachelorette party when she stopped mid-sentence and just stared at her phone. "This is broken," she mumbled. I didn't respond. They were unraveling. No tantrums, no screaming, no drama, just a clean and sudden withdrawal of energy, and watching the machine stop working without it. I sipped my drink and leaned back. No one was laughing anymore, not even Danny. They still didn't know how much more I had pulled, and I still wasn't done. No one was eating anymore. The brunch had turned into a lineup. The perfectly curated meal Melissa had posted on Instagram that morning was just sitting there untouched. The ice in the drinks had melted. The air had thickened. The laughter from earlier felt like it belonged to a different event entirely. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. I'd already done the talking. Danny was the first to break. He stood and motioned for me to follow him toward the side gate like we were teenagers sneaking out for a cigarette. I followed, curious more than anything. I wanted to see what his version of panic looked like. He asked if I'd heard anything about a weird flag on his loan application. Said it was probably nothing, but he figured maybe it had something to do with the crypto thing he was setting up. His voice was cracking by the third sentence. He had no idea I'd already seen it. That the moment he used my business name as a reference without asking, I got an alert. He didn't even spell it right. I told him I'd removed my name from everything he'd ever linked me to. Bank references, credit pulls, personal guarantees, all of it. And while I was at it, I flagged his LLC with 3 different bureaus for suspicious use of third-party financials. His face fell. He didn't yell, didn't argue. He just blinked like he couldn't believe it was really happening. "You said you believed in my project," he whispered. "I believed in you not using me without asking." We went back to the table, and everyone was quiet again. Melissa's son was inside now. Cartoons were blaring from the living room, the only noise left in the house. Rob was gone. She didn't say where he went, but I could guess. Carol was texting furiously, probably trying to freeze her card or get a customer service agent to reverse the decline. Jenny was still glued to her phone. Her face said enough. Whatever funding she thought she had wasn't there anymore. Dad looked like someone had unplugged his spine. He wasn't even pretending to scroll anymore, just staring at the table like it might solve something for him. I waited a few minutes, letting the wait settle in, letting them sit with the reality that they weren't in control anymore and hadn't been for a long time. Then I said it. You've all been living under the idea that I'd never stop, that no matter what you said, no matter how little you gave back, I'd always come through. But that's over. This isn't a phase, it's the new rule. Melissa's mouth opened like she was going to say something sharp, but nothing came out. I went on. No loans, no top-offs, no behind-the-scenes favors. I've shut it all down. Whatever you need, find someone else, or don't. I'm not your safety net anymore. I didn't yell. I didn't flinch. And they didn't argue, not one of them. Because somewhere between the buzzing phones and the canceled accounts, they started to get it. They were no longer looking at the version of me they'd grown used to. The woman who paid for things quietly in the background, who let their jokes slide, who handled things so smoothly they never even saw the wires. That woman was gone. And the new version? They didn't know what I was capable of yet, but they were starting to wonder. They didn't say sorry, not that day. They weren't ready to admit anything yet. But the way they sat, quiet, uncertain, watching me like I was someone new, they didn't have to. The shift had already happened. Melissa hadn't looked at me once since Rob left. Her posture had collapsed completely, shoulders curled in, the way someone sits when they know there's nothing left to defend. Her phone was face down now, silent like even it had given up trying to save her. She was thinking about her kid, about the bills due this week, about the calls that were definitely coming Monday morning. Maybe for the first time, she was feeling the real cost of living in a house you can't afford and pretending you can. Dad sat completely still. The man who used to bark orders at waiters and joke about old-school discipline hadn't said a word in 20 minutes. There was no plan left to spin. He knew the car would be gone by the end of the month, unless he came up with a miracle. The silence hit him hard. For the first time, maybe ever, he wasn't the loudest man at the table. Aunt Carol gave up trying to soften the mood. She'd been joking about it earlier, acting like her declined card was just a funny inconvenience. But now she was typing quietly, probably canceling deliveries or pulling up her balance, trying to figure out how she'd replace the couple hundred I'd been sending without telling anyone. She was always so proud. She never asked for help directly, just hinted at emergencies and hoped I'd pick up on it. I always did, until now. Jenny had disappeared into the house. She'd said something about a call, but didn't come back out. I assumed she finally checked her bank account and saw that the rent buffer was gone. I'd removed myself from her setup the night before. There was no warning. That was the point. Danny hadn't moved at all. That was unusual for him. He was usually the loudest voice, always pitching some new scheme or talking about how close he was to a breakthrough. But now, nothing. Just silence. He kept staring at his phone, at the email from the loan company, the same one I saw when he used my business without permission. He knew I torched that for him, and he knew I wasn't bluffing when I said I wasn't finished. I stood up slowly, didn't make a scene, just finished my coffee, placed the cup down, and looked at them. "Thanks for brunch," I said. Melissa flinched slightly. Dad glanced up. No one responded. As I walked down the lawn toward the gate, I heard it. My dad calling out, "Hey!" That was it. Just that. No sentence, no apology, just a word hanging there like he wanted to pull something back but didn't know where to start. I kept walking. I got in my car and sat there for a minute before turning the engine. I didn't feel triumphant. Not exactly. What I felt was still, like I had finally stepped outside the grip they'd all quietly had on me for years. Like I had unplugged something that was never supposed to be running this long. They used to call me the sponsor, the one who always paid, who never asked questions, who laughed at their jokes, even when I knew I was the punchline. But now they didn't make jokes around me. Now they lowered their voices when I spoke. Now they feared losing me more than they feared asking for help. They didn't respect me because I gave. They respected me now because I stopped. And I liked it that way. And the update. It's been just over 5 months since that brunch, the last time we were all in one place. No one talks about it directly, but it left a crater. Everyone scattered after it, like pieces of something they couldn't put back together. They haven't invited me to anything since. No texts, no half-hearted, "You coming this weekend?" messages, not a single sarcastic joke. For the first month, it was dead silence. I wasn't sure if they were waiting for me to come crawling back, or if they were finally forced to face the version of their lives without me holding the foundation. Turns out they were adjusting. Melissa sold the house quietly. No announcement. No just listed post with fake excitement. She didn't even tell the family. I found out through a friend who works in real estate. She moved into a smaller place, condo style, no backyard, no room for the brunches she used to host like royalty. She picked up remote work doing customer support for a tech company. Not glamorous, but it's work. Her kids are in after-school programs now, and she stopped pretending she's too good for budgeting apps. Rob never came back. Dad returned the lease. Not voluntarily, but because the dealership called in the balance and he had nothing left to stall with. He tried getting a new car on credit and got denied. Now he uses public transportation. I saw him once at a train station on my way back from the city. He pretended not to notice me, but he did. He looked smaller, not just in presence, just in spirit. The loud man who used to fill every room had gotten quiet. He sends a message every now and then, nothing dramatic, just small check-ins. No, "I need a hand." No, "Can you cover this?" Just messages that say things like, "Hope you're doing all right." I never got those before. Aunt Carol left her apartment and moved in with a friend across town. She had to cancel a couple subscriptions she used to brag about. But then she did something I didn't expect. She called me, not to ask for help, not to spin a story, just to tell me she finally paid off one of her cards, and that she'd been cooking at home every night to keep costs down. She sounded proud. She said, "Thank you, not for the money, for stopping." Jenny got a part-time job. Actually, 2. Dog walking and helping out at a bakery. She used to roll her eyes at anything that didn't involve influencers and brand deals. But now she posts about being on the grind like it's a badge of honor. I haven't heard from her directly, but I saw she refollowed me on Instagram. That's about as close to an apology as I'll get from her. And Danny? He ghosted everyone for a while. I figured he was spiraling. But then a few weeks ago, I got a random email alert. He'd listed me as a past connection on a job application. Not for a startup this time, for an actual logistics firm, a real company with payroll and policies. I didn't respond. Didn't have to. Just knowing he was doing it on his own was enough. And me? I wake up without dread now. I eat what I want, when I want, with my own money. I've started investing properly, not just handing cash over like I'm fixing potholes in someone else's life. My phone barely rings. No one's asking for favors disguised as love. No sudden emergencies that require quiet payments. And most importantly, I feel like myself for the first time in years. When I do run into them, at a store, on the street, once at a birthday party for a distant cousin, they're different. They don't joke the same. They don't smirk. They're careful now, measured. They ask me how I'm doing, and they wait for an answer. They don't mock me anymore because they're not sure what I'd do if they did. There's respect now, but not the kind they give out of love. The kind that comes from knowing someone finally drew a line and won't ever let you cross it again. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done. And staying done feels good.